Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dumb Dad Podcast. My name is Evan, and I'm a dumb dad.
Hey everybody, my name is Kevin, and I'm a dumb dad.
Hey, pal.
Hey, bud.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very excited.
Very good, very excited. We have a guest today.
That's right.
He is a comedian, an actor, an author who's been in such shows as The Chris Gethard Show, Parks and Rec, The Office, Space Force, and Broad City. He's also been in movies such as The Other Guys, Ghostbusters, The Heat, and he started Mike Birbiglia's Don't Think Twice. He has an incredible stand-up special on HBO called Career Suicide, and is currently hosting his podcast, Beautiful Anonymous. And he's here today to talk to us about his new book, The Lonely Dad Conversations. Thank you for joining us, and welcome, Chris Gethard.
What a joy to be here. We should tell all the listeners that, like dumb dads, we just struggled for 15 minutes to figure out how computers work.
Yeah, we were supposed to start yesterday.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Yeah,
Chris.
thank you.
We're so happy to have you on with us.
Happy to be here. I've been having a very dad day.
Man, yeah.
I was doing yard work and then replacing. I have one of these doors that needs clips to hold the windows or the screen into the door, and I replaced all the clips, and I did it, and I didn't mess it up.
Yes.
How
Good
many
work.
trips? How many trips to the hardware store?
2.
Yep.
Well, first I went and told them I need new clips, and they said, what size? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, go bring one of the old ones. And then when I took out the ones from my door, I brought it in, and the guy said, there's like an anchor that you pulled out that's not supposed to come out. I said, please don't tell my wife. And then he gave me new anchors. And in my head, I said, I doubt I can do this. But I did it. And my wife never even knew how bad I messed it up. So now we've got some shiny new clips on the door.
Yeah.
I feel really good.
It's such a good feeling. I don't know when that happens. I know you've talked about it a little bit in your book, but when does it happen that you talk about being a lawn guy? We just get so
I know. I'm sad
excited about this stuff. Yeah.
I love
You're sad
I
about it?
love my lawn so much, and I'm so bummed that this is what my life is.
Same. Oh man. Well, hey, before we get into it, I have a small story about you. So I do this now for a living. I do a podcast, and we have a social media, Comedy Dads channel. And when I first started exploring comedy I don't remember the year I started, but I moved to New York in 2005, and that's where I met my wife, Annie, and the two of us started pursuing comedy by doing Upright Citizens Brigade in New York. And
I
that
taught
was like
most of New York City in improv classes around that stretch of history.
Yeah.
I will say though, we only had you for, I think it was a workshop during like the Del Close Marathon or something like that. And so it was like 1 3-hour class that we met you, and it was like, to us, we were like, you were rock stars. You, like Lennon Parham, Bobby Moynihan, all those guys were like heroes before we even ever saw you on television. It was so exciting. And I remember, I've always thought you were such a great guy, because I remember like it was 1 3-hour class, but then like 6 months later, I was at like Herald Night one night, and I was passing by you, and I was like, hey Chris, and you're like, Kevin, how are you? And I was like,
Nailed it. Look at that. I nailed it.
He knows my name.
Nailed it. Yeah, there was a very fun stretch of life where it was, I look back, I go, man, I was doing shows and teaching people and picking up gigs when I could, and it felt like things hadn't gotten big enough yet that they hadn't fully corporatized. And
Right.
It was definitely cult-like, but maybe not in like a totally gross way. And I'm happy to have been a part of that system during its golden age, for sure.
I think that's the proper way to explore it. I remember Kevin Hines one time like came out to drinks with us after a class and was like, I don't envy you guys. It's getting ridiculous here. He's like, it used to be a way more indie. And he's like, and you guys are all trying to get on Herald teams and whatever.
It was
like,
hard.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I definitely, I felt like I kind of broke away and did my own thing. And looking back on it, I don't know if these were conscious decisions, but one was like, part of why I didn't want to teach anymore was because people would throw so much money into the theater. And I was hitting a point where I'm going, at a certain point, you got to tell people if they're not going to make it so they can save their money,
Yeah.
and make an informed choice. And then I also was like, man, there's just more rules than they used to be. I think I need to go find an environment with less rules. And that's how I wound up on public access television for a few years, a land of no rules.
No rules
my
at all.
gosh, that's such a cool show.
I remember tuning in to seeing you on public access television and watching a few minutes going like, this is,
Wild
what is
stuff.
happening here?
Oh.
But in many ways I appreciate it because it was just like, this is great that it was like, this just felt like, I mean, you can correct me here, but it just felt like, let's hit record and see what happens tonight.
A lot of it,
Is what
we would go in with, at best, half-formed ideas. Because, I mean, there were so many things that would break or go wrong technically that we quickly learned, like, why try to plan this meticulously when things are going to go wrong? If you plan it halfway and we're all improvisers and we can take phone calls and we can fill in the blanks, you know, then it's not a letdown. Then it's like you're overachieving or exceeding the ideas. But I will tell you, I think about it now as a guy in my 40s with a kid, because I sit here, I go, there is so much video footage of me on New York public access television before my life had any consequences. And I sit here and I'm like, is some kid going to walk up to my son in the schoolyard and be like, I found a video of a dominatrix beating the shit out of your dad on public access. Like, am I going to be the thing he is mocked for? I could see it.
I mean, maybe it's just like you were kind of ahead of the curve of like, because none of us grew up with social media. So we don't have that like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Well, everyone saw it, but you do.
It's all out there. I think about taking it, you know, it's during the pandemic, I saw an upswell in people that were like, oh, I found your show and it's really, it's helping me through some stuff or whatever, which I feel so far away from the guy who made the TV show at this point that there's a part of me that's like, should I just take these all down or just like leave up the best ones and remove the hundreds of hours of other stuff? But it seems like it still clicks with people, so I'm not going to do it yet. But I definitely have that feeling of like I'm a very different person now. Like I'm obsessed with my lawn, and I volunteer on Tuesday nights to drive an ambulance in my small town in New Jersey. Like I'm an entirely different human being. I'm a dad. I'm a lame, very lame. I'm far away from those old rock star days, that's for sure.
Well, it's funny. I think in your book you said how you feel like you're not as fun as you were anymore, and like that's a feeling that. But I told Kevin, I was like, I think he's probably just as fun as he was before. He's just fun to a different audience now. You're probably super fun to your son, but maybe not the same way you felt when you were younger.
I will say, me and my son have a good time, and there's another weird thing that I wonder if you guys have run into, which is like the other kids he plays with. And I'm wary of being the funny dad. I don't want to be the funny dad. I promise you, I'm not one of these people who's sitting here trying to put on a show and get the other toddlers to like me. And I've seen that in action. We've all seen it, you know, the demonstrative. I was just at the park with my wife and my mother-in-law on Easter, and we were walking around and saw this dad making a big production out of scolding other people's kids. And I was like, ooh, please let that never be me. Someone putting on a big show for the whole playground. But my son will run over and like jump on me and start yelling, and I'll start yelling back. And the other kids in the neighborhood pick up on that of like, oh, this dude says yes to it, you know? This dude's down. So then the other kids run around and they'll run up and punch me from behind, and I'll spin around and act like I'm mad, and they know that I'm not. And I have realized like I am the funny dad in a way that's problematic, because these kids like physically will beat me for their own joy. And I do have that side of things going on, and it's not always great. I got to draw some new boundaries there.
Yeah, it's only a 5-year-old before you get nailed in the crotch.
Well, a 5-year-old, our neighbor, and she's very sweet, adorable little redhead kid who plays with my son all the time. I caught them eating a bunch of Easter candy that they got into under my watch. And I was like, guys, you know you can't be doing that. And they were all laughing. It was my son and these 2 girls who live next door.
Yeah.
And they were laughing, and I took the candy and put it away, and she tried to grab some more, and I went, hey, you know you can't do that. I'm going to have to call your mom if you do that. And then they went out front, and I saw them. I was standing in the door, and they started looking in the kitchen window, and this little 5-year-old redheaded girl starts going, I'm going to kick your ass, dude. I'll kick your ass, dude. And I had to like text her parents and be like, hey, so she's telling me she's going to kick my... And then, of course, I was like, hey, I'm right here. And she spun around and realized I was 5 feet away still watching.
He's right behind me, isn't he?
But I was like, I like being the fun dad, but I am learning like, oh, it also creates like a Lord of the Flies situation where kids think they can say things like that. And that's not good for anybody.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's always troublesome.
You're good at yes-anding, right? So in terms of like...
It's ingrained in me.
Yeah. What? You live and die for comedy. So what improvisational skills do you take into fatherhood? Maybe that's one of them. That's like maybe good or bad for you.
That one has its ups and downs. I definitely think I know how to. As far as being a guy who's generally pretty introverted, I've learned how to like roll with it when there's 8 kids and we're all in public and the attention's on me and I'm like, okay, I guess I can handle it. I've done this enough times. I'll also say this, like, I think one of the things about my comedy background, and maybe improv in particular, which I haven't done as much improv in the past 10 years, but I was certainly really immersed in it for a long time, is I do think I'm pretty good about knowing how to follow my son's lead. Because that's a big part of improv, too, of like, what's this other person going for? And how can I help him get there? And I do think it has helped me in the sense, especially of like, if there's times where he doesn't have the words to say and he's getting frustrated, I can sometimes suss it out a little bit. Or if he's getting emotional, I can kind of predict what direction it's heading in, and I get why it's going there just because my instincts of just learning, at the end of the day, improv really probably is just, can you read the other person on stage with you faster than the audience can read what they're going for? That probably would be one accurate way to describe it. So, when you spend 15 years of your life relentlessly doing that and teaching other people how to do it, there's times where I think it makes me a little bit, maybe more of a sensitive dad, or a little bit more of a able to roll with the punches and help him through some stuff instead of getting frustrated with him, because it's all reading him, right?
Yeah, for sure. Listening skills.
Let's talk about, because I actually have some questions based off of that. You go into that because I love that
this
answer.
Is real nerdy.
Real
nerdy. I like it.
Well, I wanted to talk about your book before we get too far in the weeds.
Sure.
People are like, what book are they talking about? Your book, The Lonely Dad Conversations. We both read the book. Love it. It's
Thanks.
a great book. It'd probably be best if you just tell the listeners about the book. Yeah.
It's interviews with 12 dad friends of mine. Some of them people I know through entertainment. Some of them just guys who live on the same block as me, and everything in between, all levels of relationship.
Yeah.
Also one mom, a lesbian mom, who I realized partway through I had to interview her because a lot of the dads were describing their ideal, and I was like, you're kind of describing my friend Jeannie, who happens to be a mom. And that was a very fun conversation to have, but it was, I did not expect it to be what it is. I'm really proud of this book. I had a very basic thing, which was, as I thought about fatherhood, for me, I realized like there was this weird feeling that came along with it. Loneliness was the closest word I could come up with, that at times I just felt very alone. And I wanted to ask other dad friends of mine if they felt it too. And that's the premise of the book. And what happened was, some of them were like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. More often they were like, okay, I know what you're referring to. For me, it's not loneliness. For me, it's this other thing. And that got kind of philosophical. And then it led to a lot of conversations I never saw coming about how our dads raised us, how pretty much starting at World War II up until very currently, masculinities meant one thing, and now we're the ones who are like trying to raise kids, and especially those of us raising sons, going like, well, wait, what if I want to be sensitive and thoughtful and all these things that we're saying are good now, but there's no dad, like point to the sitcom dad that was that, a lot of people talking about how bad male friendships can be and how bad we are at friendship, and just spiraled into all these things. And it was very cool for me to interview all these people separately and see that they were bringing up the same things more often than not. So the book aims to, I think, kind of put voice to all those things that we don't always speak out loud about.
It's a great book. I highly recommend it. I will say, like you were saying, the big thing you talked about throughout the book, but specifically in the beginning, and it was kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like the main purpose of the book was the backseat passenger.
That was very eye-opening, yeah.
Yeah, and talking about that and maintaining friendships with either old friends or even new ones, like keeping that going as a dad can be really, really hard. Did this book like kind of relieve you of those feelings talking to people, or did it go the other way and make you go like, oh, okay, shit, everybody's doing it the same, so this is just a feeling now? Or did it make you feel better knowing other people are, for lack of a better word, lonely?
It did make me feel a lot better just to not feel alone in the loneliness, so to speak. And to even hear, like, a friend of mine who knew me really well was like, well, the loneliness is your thing. I've known you long enough to know, like, you can get depressed, you can get lonely, and it's amplifying it. And he's like, for me, it's guilt. And that was very eye-opening for me, of just like, oh, whatever your insecurities are, they're going to boil right to the surface in a way you haven't felt before when you have a kid, you know? To hear so many other people, you know, one friend of mine, he lives a couple of houses down the block, said, I don't feel lonely, but I feel like a backseat passenger. I almost jumped out of my chair. I was like, that's what everybody's describing. This idea of just like, oh, nobody really tells you that you're sort of off to the side, looking for ways to be helpful, often making things worse, beating yourself up, comparing yourself to some idealized image of what a dad's supposed to be, assuming everybody else is doing it better than you're doing it. Like, to know that I'm not the only one who felt that was very empowering. And I'll also say too, like, it's sad to me that it takes a creative project for me to reach out to all these dads in my life and be like, how you doing? I'm doing, here's how it is for me. And a number of the guys I spoke to were like, we need to do this when it's not just a Zoom for a thing. Like, we should all be doing this. And I have been doing that with a few of these guys, and that's lovely. So selfishly, it worked out great for me.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, you touch a lot on in the book about generational dads, as you said, and like what they thought a dad should be and how they teach us how they taught us as kids. But I mean, up until basically our generation, there was no internet. And so it went from like, well, my dad did this, and so I'll do this for 5,000 years or whatever, up until the internet. And now information is absolutely everywhere. And sometimes I think, of course, the information can be extremely overwhelming because there's opinions everywhere, as we know on the internet. But also, you can source some ideas about fatherhood. How could you bring that into your life? How could you, does this work for my family? Does this not work for my family? So I think we're blessed in a lot of those ways, but it really is just going to sort of dissipate what I think the idea of what a dad is supposed to be, especially based on, like I said, what my experience was with my dad, which was lovely, but it's not the only experience of a father raising a son or children.
It's so funny you talk about the technology, because I had multiple dads call it out as far as like a scary thing that sort of separates us from how many dads were like, my kid has already told me, Daddy, get off your phone, and how we all feel weird about that, and how we're all scared of them getting on phones with access to everything. But I think it was 3 different guys. I don't know if all of them made the book. I think 2 made the book. 3 different dads, as we discussed like baby boomers and the greatest generation went, they messed up in some ways, but can you imagine doing this without YouTube? And I was like, wow, of course my dad seemed more stressed out than I was. Can you imagine having to put together any baby furniture without YouTube? Can you imagine, like all the stuff we do that we're like, it's 3 a.m. and we got to put I got to put this rocker together to see if that'll get the baby to fall asleep. Let me throw on the YouTube video, and it's just step by step someone shows you. They didn't have any of that. Ooh, that's rough. That's so rough.
If you didn't know how to swaddle a baby, you didn't know how to swaddle a baby. That was it.
Things as basic as that. And then you read, like, I read some crazy statistic. I forget exactly what the percentage was, but it was something like less than 15% of baby boomer men ever changed a diaper. It was just men didn't change diapers. And I sit here I changed hundreds of diapers. And I don't know how it would have, what was going on with wives? Did they just spend all day, every day dealing with that? I guess they did. But again, we did cloth diapers, and I can't tell you how many, even months into it, how many months I was like, I gotta call up the instructional because there's a new clip and I don't know how it works, so I'll go watch the video again. It's just endless.
I mean, all the way down to it's all aspects. How you could take care of your lawn by watching a video, right? Otherwise, all that stuff. It's all there.
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback off of what we were talking about our dads and that generation, and you talked about your dad and how he was a great dad, and I'm the same with my dad. It is funny though of how masculinity and the feelings towards your kids back then were different, and my dad has opened up to me, and he said to me he's tried to be a lot better, and him saying that opened my eyes, because I realized, like, for a while, if we ever hugged, when we were younger, it was always like with like a chest full of air. Like,
Yeah.
it was every
Yeah.
time. It was just like, I get my heart as far away from you as possible. So it was always like, all right, I'll see you later. And just like always like holding your breath. And that's a weird thing. Whereas now I feel like the thing I hear all the time, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think a couple of the dads you talk to mentioned this in your book about like that we overcorrect, that we're the generation that's overcorrecting. I'm not trying to defend ourselves, because I know this podcast is about screwing up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I was wondering, do you think we're overcorrecting? And if so, in what way? Or is that just something we're saying because people are like, we're just going way the other direction? Is that a bad thing?
It's tough to say. I mean, I'm no expert, certainly, as far as just opinion goes. I don't mind the overcorrection when it comes to like being soft and emotional with my kid.
Yeah.
My dad is great dad. We've never said the words "I love you" to each other. I'm about to turn 43 years old. Like, I now am a father, and I go, I sort of understand why he felt like he needed that tough exterior. I also will say, and no judgment to anybody else, but for me, I go, I tell my son I love him, and it's almost involuntary. It almost feels like a human instinct I would have to turn off consciously to maintain something. And I go, that's twisted. That's psychologically a whole generation of guys that felt like I love you is not a thing we say to our kids. My dad's not the only one, you know? So overcorrecting in that sense, I don't think that could ever be a bad thing for my kid to be very aware of how I feel about him. I can't imagine that's bad. One thing I will say, I've seen a lot, both in conversations with friends for this book, things that hit the cutting room floor, also other friends in my life who are teachers, is I do get the sense that current parents are just a little out of control with school. That if a kid gets a B- in a class, they have to have a parent-teacher conference. That, you know, that type of thing where you hear it, you go, I guess this is real. This doesn't just seem like a thing. You know, in comedy, you always hear people going like, oh, cancel culture. And I go, it's not real. It's not that real. There's like a handful of examples, and then a lot of people are making their whole act about this thing. The school thing, I go, oh, I've heard this from parents in my life. I've heard this from teachers in my life.
Interesting.
We are smothering teachers and helicoptering in that way. And I go, that probably isn't good. My kid has to learn that there are consequences to actions he takes, and he has to respect adults who aren't me. And school is a big part of that, right? So that's the one thing where I'm like, I bet they're going to look back at us on that. The same way that I look back and go, how come my dad and other dads of his generation wouldn't even say they loved us? When I know he does. I know my dad loves me.
Yeah.
Just will not say it. I won't say it to him. It's weird. I have a feeling that school thing is where they're going to look back and go, you guys were too much.
I can't in good conscience with my previous grades judge my child.
I remember, so my son is 8 now, and going back to like after the pandemic sort of slowly entering back into school, his first grade teacher was like the biggest challenge the whole year was the emotional state of the kids. Like the academics actually were not that big of an issue. It was because kids can learn quickly, but it was more like the social awareness and engaging with other adults and all these things that the kids did not have access to or practice or put into practice for such a long time. And that feels like that's all mixed in there. It's like they're just like thrown back into school, and some of them, especially at those ages, like didn't really have school or too much interaction with other kids. I mean, we both have 2 children, so there's a little bit there, and then we work together, so our kids are around each other. But certainly, plenty of kids that are don't have a brother and sister or something like that are just kind of thrown into that situation again. And okay, we all got to figure out how to handle it again. I imagine we're going to face repercussions of that for quite some time. My
son's an only child, and he first entered preschool during the pandemic, and all the teachers had masks, and he hates school. There's a part of him that's like, I hated school. We'll ask him, do you like school? Go, no, hate it. The teacher tells us he does really well. She's like, he's talking a good game. He likes it here. He does well. But I sit here, I go, there is a part of me that has to wonder, like, is some of that gut instinct from him that when he was introduced to this thing, people were wearing like N95s and plastic face shields. Like all his teachers the first people we really put in charge of him that weren't us looked like Darth Vader to him. Is that just going to stick for years? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be something there. To like the first people that we're leaving you with, and we're trusting these people with you, okay? And they're like, well, it looks like they don't trust me because they're
right. Sure. Right. It looks like something's going wrong globally here, guys.
Yeah.
Sure we can't just hang out at home?
Is trust the word?
Yeah. It was very funny for me, too, to realize, like, because my son was born 2019, so he aged into preschool.
Mm-hmm.
And we had him, his first birthday was April 2020. The pandemic was we were still in lockdown. Zoom birthday party. Real sad.
Yep.
Same.
Real sad first birthday party. But then to realize, like, other parents, like, I was sitting here going, no, like, got to keep these kids safe. Keep these kids out of school. We can't just reopen the schools. And then there were other parents of kids who were only a handful of years older than mine that were like, screw that. Open them up. Get the kids out of here. Get them gone. And I'm now old enough to understand that feeling.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, parents were like, screw the pandemic. Take my children. Stick them all in a room together, please. I need this 5 or 6 hours a day. Go.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
You're killing us.
And if it comes down to it, I'll take 10 minutes.
Whatever you can give me.
Whatever you can give me, I will snap your hand off for.
It's funny because I had the same thing. My son, his birthday is April 2nd, and he was born 2019.
Oh, yeah.
2019.
April 17th, 2019.
Yeah. So it was crazy because 3 weeks earlier, we celebrated my nephew's first birthday. And in person with my parents and my brother and sister-in-law. And we were all in a house and we're like, this pandemic seems to be getting kind of iffy. And then
It's a hot topic, huh?
everybody's talking about it. I bet they'll make a movie. And 3 weeks later, I'm like Zoom with everybody. Nobody's going near each other.
Yeah.
We're
Trying to explain
bleaching
to your
our
aunts and
groceries.
uncles what Zoom
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was singing happy birthday to my father-in-law's forehead. Brutal. I do want to say something, one last thing, and then we can get into the dumb dad moments. But
Yeah.
you had this quote in chapter 8. I'm going deep dive on here. It's a chapter about introverts and extroverts, which you just alluded to earlier. It's such a great line in general where you say, your child's needs don't accommodate your comfort zone. I love that line. I feel like it's true of all people, but especially dads, because I mean, how many times we go to playgrounds or, if you go to those like indoor gyms that the kids have, like my gym or something like that, and you see the moms are all kind of talking to each other and all the dads are like spread out, like they're covert ops. They're all like, they're all bugged up, keeping the, like, I got eyes on the target situation. And I don't know what that is. I don't know, like, even though we are, as you say, and I agree that we are the more, like, sensitive generation than we are what our dads are, there's clearly something ingrained in us of just, like, keep to yourself. I've definitely gotten a little bit better at that personally. Like, I don't mind talking. If like I see my son's playing with somebody's kid and there's a dad there, mom, it doesn't matter. I'll go and I'll talk to them and whatever. Has that helped you, especially since writing this book? Have you gotten better at the introvert thing, or and your kids gotten older since you read the book?
It was that chapter. That was one I did not even have an inkling was coming. My friend Keith was the first one that was like, I'm an extrovert and it's really hard because I've had to learn to shut up and let my kid have attention. And then other dads started echoing that, and I'm like, I'm an introvert. It's the opposite. I guess knowing that a lot of people struggle with that helps, but I will tell you, I'm glad you asked this question, because last weekend my son's school had a fundraiser at one of these ninja gyms. You guys know about these ninja gyms?
Yeah.
Like trampolines and rock walls and big bouncy things. Our town is very small. It's 3K through 8th grade is the one school in town. There's one school, 3-year-olds until you leave for high school. And it was a fundraiser for the whole school. So I knew my kid would be one of the youngest ones there. They send out the thing. It says, here's how much it is for the kids to come jump in the facility. For parents, if you want to jump, it's X amount of dollars. And if you're just going to watch, it's only $5. So I go, well, I'm going to jump. I'm not going to go to a ninja gym with my kid and not jump around with him, right? Like, to me, that's simple logic.
It's insane.
When I tell you guys that there were 30 to 40 children, and I was the only adult that's signed up to jump. I'm not exaggerating. By
And then
the
when
end,
you're an introvert, you're like, what have I done to myself?
Yeah.
it's my nightmare. It's my nightmare. And it's weird because, you know, Kevin, you were saying like you took a workshop from me and I was like the rock star UCB guy back in the day. But I think anybody who knew me even back then would go, it's weird that this guy likes to get on stage because when you talk to him, he's a pretty shy, quiet dude. My whole stretch in entertainment, the idea that it's like a lot of these other parents know each other. No one else from my son's class came. So there weren't any parents I even recognized. There was no one for me to even like talk about with, joke about it with. And I'm just like a 43-year-old man bouncing around in these neon green socks on a bunch of trampolines with school children while their parents and like I'm a good dude. I also know I'm a weird looking guy. I got a giant forehead and these glasses and stuff. Like my vibe is generally okay, but if I'm the only guy bouncing on the trampolines with your kid, you might be like, let's clock this. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna watch. Then all the dads are watching.
At that point, everybody's like, who's this guy? But I'll tell you, I had a really, really great moment where this other dude halfway through just showed up bouncing next to me. He's like, saw you out here, man. Looked fun. Figured I'd come join. I was like, you are the kindest soul. And he burst out laughing. I was like, this guy just went and spent more money out of pity to come do this with me.
For the children.
Because he could feel it was all eyes on me. And he was like, this dude is dying on the goddamn vine on this one. But then that guy and I exchanged numbers, and he said a few dads from town are hanging out Thursday night, so I might have some new friends out of it. So who knows?
Oh, there you go.
That's always a
That's
nice
perfect.
That's what it's.
Yeah,
That's so
I hope I
good.
don't mess this up. But that was, you can imagine just 30 kids and Chris Gethard on trampolines
Yeah.
while the parents are all like, who's this weird perv?
That's a new special right there.
It was bad. It'll definitely be a new bit. It'll definitely be shown in the stand-up. It will at least be tried at an open mic. I can tell you that.
Yeah. You want to get into dumb dad moments?
Oh yeah. So this is the part of the show where we share our dumb dad moments, where it can be of the week, or because you're a guest, you can just pick an all time if you got like a good one. But we can go to kind of kick it off of what dumb thing did you do this week? Evan?
I got one.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I got one. It deals a little bit with negligence. And okay, so small backstory. This past week for our kids' spring break, I'm from Seattle area. And so we traveled back home to spend some time with the grandparents. And one of the days we were like, let's go have like a day in Seattle. Like, let's take the kids around. We'll go do we'll go up in the Space Needle. We'll go on the big wheel around the waterfront. We'll have lunch and kind of make a day of it. And then so, the kids were going to be tired at the end of that, which is fine. But it was a big day of fun. And then at the end of that, we drove over to this place called Top Golf. I don't know if you know what Top Golf is. It's basically like a driving range, but as I think my sister described it, this is kind of like bowling, which is like they have clubs for you. You can order drinks and everything. It's like this big fun thing. Even if you've never, you could tell tons of people that were there that have never even played golf before. A big fun thing. So we order a bunch of food over at the table. My son's excited. He's hitting balls. And, it's like me and my dad and my son in this little bay, and the rest of the family is in this different bay. And we're sitting there having food. We order some pizza. He had pizza for lunch. More pizza. This kid's just blowing up with how much fun he's having. Now this is kind of relevant to the story. He had a cream soda for the first time in his life for lunch. He wanted to try it.
Big move.
Loved it. Of course, drank the whole thing. So it's, the whole thing. It's all a big, exciting day. And then so when we get all the food, the waitress comes over and goes, and a root beer for the boy, for the long hitter or whatever. So my son gets all excited. She brought him a root beer.
Root beer for the long hitter.
I don't know.
Who is this old-timey lady?
So the dumb dad moment exists there when I was like this when I was a kid. When I have too much excitement, too much stuff in me, I start getting an upset stomach. But we're thinking like, it's fun, go ahead, whatever. So about an hour into it, my son's like, I got to go to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, do you hold it or do you go right now? It was like his turn. He's like, I got to go right now. I was like, okay. So I walk him to the bathroom. I'm standing in the bathroom with him, and he's kind of hovering around the stall. But then he goes back to the urinal, and he's like, he kind of goes back to the stall again and like yanks on. I'm like, well, there's somebody in there, and he's like, okay, I really need to use it. I'm like, okay, let's just wait a second. I'm trying to like ease his tension a little bit. I could tell he's starting to like he's panicking a little bit. And he's standing like this. He's like standing 6 inches from the door, and I was like, well, let the person come out of there first before you're banging down the door.
He's sweating is what that means.
He's sweating. So then the guy comes out conveniently enough, and I'm clocking a little bit of discomfort from him. So rather than just go, why don't you just, let me know when you're done. I go in there with him, and he goes, he starts to sit down, or he kind of looks at me with like this panicked look on his face. And I go, do you feel like you're going to throw up? And he goes, no. And I go, okay. You probably just got to go to the bathroom. We had a big day. You had some pizza, everything. Why don't you just sit down? And he sits down, and then within 5 seconds, he barfs all over the floor. And I mean, the whole day of fun on the floor of the stall right there. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then he stands up and more in the toilet. And I was like, oh, man. I felt so bad for him because now it's all just coming down on him, like the day. So he does feel better. He kind of just gets it all out of himself. But now I'm standing there. I'm like, now what do I do? My son's 8. I can't be like, go get somebody. Because he also doesn't feel well. But also, like, I don't want to just leave that situation in there as if, like, I don't know what happened. So I'm like, okay, you stay here and lock the door until I come tell you to open it. And sort of lucky for me, unlucky for this guy, I walk out, and there was a guy that was, like, basically with his cart waiting to clean the women's restroom. And I was like, hey, man, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but my son just threw up all over the stall in the men's room. And he, the dejected look on this guy's face, and he's like, okay. And I was like, I'm so sorry, man. And he goes, it's part of my job. And I felt so bad. And so I was like, okay. So we go in there, and I'm like banging on the door. I'm like, okay, buddy, open the door. So he like calmly comes out and like, okay, go wash your hands. The guy just starts like prepping, he puts this "don't come in here" sign on the bathroom thing and everything. I'm like, I just felt so bad. So we go back to where the whole family was, and I go to my wife and I go, how much cash do you have on you? She's like, what do you mean? I go, I need some cash. And she's like, okay. So she hands me $20.
Okay.
And I go marching back in there, and there's like 2 guys now waiting to use the restroom, which is closed. And I step over the sign, and I walk in, and I go, man. And I just slap it on the counter. And I go, this is for you. Thank you so much. I really apologize. He's like, it's all right, man. Thank you very much. And so we went back. But I felt so bad. But it was like, man, all I had to recognize the moment was get that root beer out of here. Like, don't set that down. Bring him a water.
I liked that it looked like to the other dads that you were like paying to get into the stall. They're like, you can't go in here, man. He's like, cash. Cash gets you anywhere, guys.
Know how to work a door, bro. I gotta use the bathroom. So it was just like, probably my wife and I looked at each other like, man, if we would have thought for like 2 seconds, we probably would have recognized like, that might not be the best idea if you have that, but we're just trying to like go along with all the fun. And I quite literally paid for it.
You now could start like an urban legend in your son's mind where you can convince him that you can never mix cream soda and root beer. You can convince him.
That's right.
That is true.
It's a
And then
dangerous
he'll be
combination.
in his late teens before someone's like, what are you talking about? He'll say it at a restaurant with friends. And they'll be like,
As
what?
they're all doing like the graveyard soda. He's like, you guys are crazy.
They're like, we're doing it right now. And he's like, no, I saw it's a unisex bathroom. I'm not doing it, guys.
Anyway, dumb dad moment of the week.
Oh my gosh. Well, mine is I visited it's spring break for us, and so I visited my parents who live in Palm Springs area. So it's like it was super hot, and they have a pool, and we were really excited. And my son took swim classes. Like he just turned 4, so he took swim classes because he fell in a pool, like maybe a little under a year ago. And it was super scary. Like, he was wearing his floaties. He was ready to get out. Got him out. Took his floaties off. And I was like, all right, let's go to Mom. And I walked ahead of him like an idiot. And I turn around, and he's in the middle of the pool on the bottom. And he was fine. It was crazy. I was able to get in there before he really swallowed any water. Like, I was very fast. I paid for that later because I'm not fast. And but, like, I got him out, and he was fine, but then my wife and I were like, all right, we're going to pay for swim lessons. And my neighbor on the other side of the fence, she does not just swim lessons, but she does like, I don't know how you'd word it, but like emergency crisis swim lessons. Like she's the one who gets like infants, like all day the backyard is just children screaming for their life, screaming like top of their lungs because she's like, sorry, you got to learn to swim. Like that's what this is for. Like she does it with infants, she does it with toddlers. She's legit. So we were like, all right, let's do this. So we paid for like a month's worth of classes, or maybe it was 10 classes over the course of a month. And by the end of the month, he was swimming. Like, and he was pretty good about it. He didn't like scream too much throughout the whole thing, but he was swimming. Now
That's what she teaches: screaming while swimming.
Yeah, you got to breathe.
You got to let people know you're in the pool and having fun.
Yeah. So he was legit, really good at it. And then cut to, the winter. And I mean, my family, we got COVID and strep throat and then cold flus. Like we got everything this past like winter. So we didn't visit my parents for a really, really long time. So now when we go back, he doesn't know how to swim at all. So I'm like,
oh, you lost all of it?
Lost all of it.
Oh,
which we knew because we went to a hotel once and we forgot like his flippers and his goggles. We're like, it's fine, he knows how to swim. And we brought him in and it was like, oh no, he does not. So it was like a horrible experience of just like holding a kid who wants to swim, but you let go and he just sinks. And like a dog, like just doesn't learn anything. It's like, all right, but I got to hold you. And he pushes off and sinks and you pick him up, go, now you know. And he's like, yeah, I know now. It kicks off your chest and sinks. And you're just like, this is awful. So we're at my parents and I'm like, no, man, like we're here for like 4 days. I was at every one of your classes. We're gonna swim. We're gonna learn to swim again.
You're the teacher now.
So I'm the teacher now. Except I have somewhat of a personal connection to this child that my teacher did not. That his teacher did not. So like when he's crying, I'm like, it's okay. And I'm like holding him in, but I'm also like being mean to him where like she would do this thing. It was insane. Like I don't know if your kid can swim, Chris, but like I don't know if you could fathom she would have him lay on his back, and then when he would start to cry, she would go bubbles and put him completely underwater.
Oh, wow.
And push him away. Meaning like breathe, go. And then that's what got him to swim. So I'm doing that and he's just coming up looking at me with the most distrust you've ever seen in a human's eyes. And I did this for like 3 days straight, and then I would take a break and let him like float around. But like you're not supposed to put floaties on them when they're learning that stuff because it gives them false confidence when they're taking classes. So it's just like, all right, we'll sit on this like recliner floater thing. And it was just so stressful. And then cut to my dad needs help changing a light fixture the last day we're there. And of course, we're dads now who like to fix lawns. So, of course, I'm like, yeah, let's put in a light fixture.
Dig deep into this situation.
So we went to the hardware store twice, and we've like drilling holes. I ended up in his attic for no reason. I
was going to go check it out, actually.
I did. I was like, it looks really nice up here. It's clean. And I get the like light fixture like drilled in and all that stuff. And then I come outside, and my wife's like, look, he's swimming. And he was totally swimming on his own. He just didn't need his dick dad around yelling
holding
at him
him back,
dunking him. He was in there for like 20 minutes. And apparently my daughter was just like, come on, you know how to swim. And my daughter, who's older, was like encouraging him to swim. And then my wife and them. And I mean, like literally came outside. They're letting go of him. And he's like swimming underwater to the other end of the pool. And you're like, all right. I guess I'm not a swim teacher.
It's okay, Kevin. You're a life teacher, just not a swim teacher.
Lights.
Light teacher. Yeah, you could put it in some light socket. Yeah. Okay. All right, Chris.
I have one from a couple months ago where, again, it loops back around to what I was saying in the beginning of, like, sometimes being fun with him, I have to learn that there are boundaries to that.
Yeah.
Before I was talking about how the other kids get in on it and sometimes I get thrashed. I did remember an incident, this is probably about 6 weeks ago now, 2 months ago, where there is an episode of Bluey, which I'm not sure your guys' opinion. I feel like Bluey is great. Out of all the kids' entertainment, I'm like, it's Bluey and Sesame Street, and then everything else up for debate. But Bluey's up there with the best of the best, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, and it will catch you off guard with the feels, too.
Oh, my goodness, will it? It will kick you in the face in a way where your kid doesn't understand why you're quietly weeping over something bingo.
I need to leave the room for a second.
And then your kid's like, Dad, bingo just found a bug. And you're like, no, you don't understand that that's a thing you feel when you're young and you forget. And then it reminded me what it's like.
Yeah.
But there's one episode, Because if you know the show Bluey, you know a number of the episodes are sort of the dad comes up with these games and they play the games.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very fun because then my son wants to play those games and we have these games. And there's one episode where I don't know that I've seen this one, but my son got real in where someone pretends to be a robot in an episode of Bluey.
Uh-huh.
And the kids realize, I think it's the dad, and then the kids realize the robot will just say, yes, master, and do whatever they say.
Yes.
My kid found it very fun. So there's one morning where he woke up for school, and my son, he commits to his characters. When it's pretend time, he's really into it.
Yeah.
It's one of his strengths, and it's really fun. And I woke up, and he woke up, and I was like, good morning, Cal. And he's like, I am not Cal, I am a robot. And I was like, oh, good morning, robot. And he's like, good morning, master. And he starts calling me master. And then I realized this game where I messed up was I abused my power that this game gave me. Because I realized that there's so many aspects of our morning routine that are traditionally a nightmare. And I could just play the game because he would just say, yes, master, and do whatever I said. So I would go, you have to sit down and eat your whole breakfast and you're not allowed to get out of your chair. And he went, yes, master. And he went and he sat down and he just ate his breakfast. And he didn't find 10 excuses to get out of his seat. He didn't try to make me put on TV while he ate all this stuff. I went, oh my God. I go, you got to put on your socks and shoes and you can't complain about it. Yes, master. He's doing all this stuff. You got to take your plate over to the sink. Yes, master. I'm like, this is the greatest game ever. Thank you to whoever invented Bluey.
Yeah.
It's great. So then I put him in the car. We go to drive to preschool. It's probably been about 10 or 15 minutes since we played the robot game when I get him in the car. Another 10 minutes to school. So it's between 20 and 30 minutes since we have done this.
Yeah.
And I walk up. There's 7 children in my kids' class. So all the parents gather there. And then the teacher comes out. She has this string with these donuts on it. Each kid grabs a donut and they walk in together. And all the parents every day, they hug their kid. They say goodbye. They say, okay, I'll see you. Love you, this and that. And I say to my son, I go, I just go, okay, be good today, Cal. And he turns around and not even really doing a robot voice, just turns around and goes, yes, master. And every other parent and the teachers all turned and looked at me like, what? What? And I was like, and I swear it came out of my mouth. I just looked at all of them and I went, I don't force my child to call me master. I don't. And they were all staring at me and I was like, he's pretending to be a robot. He pretends to be a robot sometimes. You're a robot, right? And he goes, yes, master. And then there was this collective breath that was let out. But there was a moment recently where I abused the privilege of that game. And it was a dumb move because briefly a group of parents thought I forced my child into verbal submission by calling me master.
You're one step away from going, no one watches Bluey. Really?
Yeah. I'm like, you guys, come on. You all know that episode, right?
Somebody help me out here.
Everybody knows
Greg,
the Bluey
anybody?
episode, right? It's Bluey. Please don't have me arrested, please.
My kids, they know. My son does this. We'll be watching it, and we'll put on a couple episodes, and like, I want to choose one. I want to choose one, and he'll go, I want to choose one, and he goes, well, we're not going to watch that one. That one makes both you guys cry, and they'll go, like, he knows which ones we can't get through.
I love that.
Without crying.
That.
I was caught off guard on one episode. This past weekend, visiting my parents, they were watching Bluey, and is the bedtime episode where like the daughter Bingo's in outer space, like because she's dreaming, and the mom is the sun, and like the music is just stunning, and it's just very emotional. And I was watching it with my son, and I'm getting like choked up like I do with Bluey, and if I'm like holding it together, swallowing that lump, and then like the episode ends. And my son turns to me, and he's never happened before, bawling his eyes out.
Wow.
And he just goes, I want mom. And I start bawling, and I was like, we should go get her. It's like, that's all I needed to be like validation of like, yeah, we should cry. This was hard.
There's one episode of Bluey that I watched. There was one night where I forget if I think he was sick. He had a cough. And we don't ever let him sleep in our bed, but on a rare occasion, if he just keeps waking up, so she won't wake up. I'll go, come on, we'll go sleep on the couch, buddy. And we go in the living room.
Nice.
And this one was so bad, I put on TV because he wasn't sleeping through this cough. It was bad.
Yeah.
There was this episode of Bluey. Have you seen the one? It's got no words, and it's just the mom and Bingo. There's no words in the whole episode. it got me so bad. I'll spoil it if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
It's basically, it's raining outside, and Bingo keeps wanting to play outside, and the mom is, without words, begging her not to, and then she goes out and then runs back in to get toys and leaves mud everywhere, and the mom's on her knees scrubbing it, and then Bingo runs back in, and she's like, please stop, and all without words again, and running in and out, and then eventually the mom just lets out a big sigh and goes out in the rain and starts building little boats with Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me so bad, I told my wife, I was like, you have to watch this episode of Bluey. I've never seen something more masterful. It doesn't use any words, and it shows how many sacrifices moms make, the way that kids dominate a mom's life, all the unappreciated things that nobody sees that moms do. I was like, but don't watch it until you're in like a really good, solid headspace. Because it's going to destroy you. It's going to absolutely destroy you.
I think just in your career, especially like even going back to Career Suicide, your stand-up special, and how open you are about your experiences in life, dealing with anxiety. I have anxiety. I've dealt with it heavily through my 30s. We've touched on it on our podcast, even as of recent, that how important it is to share our emotion with our kids and not be afraid to be emotional in front of our kids, which almost like, it's not the overcorrecting thing, but it's definitely not what our father's generation did. And even your buddy Greg on your book was saying he's so much more fearful. Maybe not so much alone. He felt the real fear of being a father and what that means and pushing forward. And I think it's important. I mean, to maybe tell your kids when you're scared or show them I'm sad because of this or something. And I think that's a big thing going forward. But yeah, Bluey certainly opens plenty of those doors. But I'm assuming that do you feel comfortable doing that with your son more so than your father did with you?
Yeah. I mean, I still feel that. I still sometimes feel that thing of he doesn't need to know all my stress, you know?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Especially being an artist. I lost my health insurance during the pandemic, you know? I usually get it through the Screen Actors Guild. I didn't. Like, that's a level of stress where I go, I can't explain the American healthcare system to this child right now.
Right.
But I will say one of the really nice things is I go, sometimes when I'm feeling it, he will sense it. And instead of trying to hide from it, I'll just go, hey, buddy, can I have a hug? Like, I could use a real big hug right now. And he'll come over and he'll do it because he wants to help, you know? Whereas, again, not judging my dad was really great. But I remember so distinctly when his mom died, when my grandma died, I remember asking my mom, how come dad isn't crying? I remember asking my mom that.
Yeah.
Like, when my mom passes away, my son's going to see me cry, probably for weeks, you know? Like, it's just such a marked difference in how that stuff should be avoided and or embraced. So I don't feel any shame in it, though. I will say he's real small. So things like that of sometimes that's the short answer. I'm always happy to let him see my emotions. He's not necessarily old enough that I need to always burden him with the why just yet, because some of it is just stuff that he's going to go, wait, what's health insurance? You know, and that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But Chris, if you want to write a follow-up book, I mean, explaining health insurance for kids, I think this is a great follow-up book.
An ABC book. Just start with an ABC book.
What a grim book that would be.
Well, Chris, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. The book is The Lonely Dad Conversations. Check it out. Where can people find the book?
Find it on Scribd, scribd.com. And I believe it's still active. You go to try.scribd.com/Gethard. You should be able to just sign up for free and check it out and see if you like it. And I don't totally understand that business model, but I am happy to pay it forward to any of your listeners.
Do you have any shows or anything coming up?
And if you're in the New York area, I am throwing a big festival in Brooklyn, May 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. My podcast, Beautiful Anonymous, where I talk to people on the phone. We're doing a fan convention, but it's going to have comedy shows and live music and film screenings and a whole bunch of great stuff. So all that info is at beautifulconanonymous.com. That's a much appreciated plug. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for all you do for the entertainment industry, for representing fathers out there. That's what we try to do here as well. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for being on.
I'm gonna do my part. Thanks.
All right.
Good?
Yep.
All right, we're all set.
Bye. Welcome to the world, little one. Welcome to life.
How do I stop this?